Politics and religion, they do not mix, they collide.
Like America itself, Tatiana Torres' story is a story of hard work, self-sacrifice, and faith. But unlike many others who sought political asylum here, hers is also a story about living the undocumented life. Tatiana, I think most people might not understand the journey that your family went through, living the undocumented life in the United States. But you certainly do. When did your family finally win documented status, and were you able to finally exhale at that time?
Sure. So we've been in this country for 34 years. We came from Colombia. We were not able to, I was not able to vote until 10 years ago. So that was a big relief, and being a U.S. citizen was one of the highlights of my life. Can I exhale though? I don't think I can. I think I'm still holding my breath at times. I think that I hold my breath at times when I see what's happening around the country and the agony that some are living. And so sometimes it's hard to breathe. The pressure is a lot. The pressure to be a woman of color, the pressure to be able to speak freely, I still hold that within me. And I still look at my skin. I can't walk out of my skin, right? This is who I am. This is what I was born. I was born as a Latina woman. But, so I think that I'm able to freely speak. I'm able to constantly be able to voice my opinion without the fear of being taken out or kicked out of now my country. But that pressure still exists when I see others that are going through the circumstance that I went through, and they don't have that opportunity to breathe and exhale. And there's some days where you just can't breathe because of everything that's happening, the climate in the country, the suffering, the pain that folks of color are living. It's hard.
Even for those that have gone through the process, the long, hard process that you've gone through in terms of winning documented status and finally becoming naturalized citizens of this country, do you still feel under threat?
I'm a brown woman. Of course I'm under threat. Every time I walk out the street, if I don't open my mouth, I could always be looked at as a Latina. And no one will ever take that away, and I will not allow anybody to take that away. However, there's people that are in worse situations than I am. I am now a U.S. citizen. I can vote. No one can kick me out of this country. But there's folks that are walking that look just like me, that might not speak English as well, that might live in that fear and will continue to live in that fear constantly. So for me, I still feel at times threatened by it, even though I can defend myself and I don't have to. I worry about the people that do. I worry about the folks that still have to live through the situation that I lived for many years in the climate that's much different than 10 years ago and 15 years ago, in a climate where people are now even more exposed than ever, in a climate where racial equality is uncovered yet again as not even being present at this time. So yes, and you know, it's funny you say that because even when walking by certain buildings here in Washington, D.C., which I lived in for 10 years now, when I see, Homeland Security, in the pit of my stomach, there's still tiny little fear. There's that young girl, that teenager, that young adult that still is knowing what that is at those ages, is still kind of fearful. So the difference between now being an American citizen and having legal status and the acceptance is chasms away. It's a huge gap. As a U.S. citizen, I can vote. I can have a voice without fear. I can exercise my right to vote, to elect folks, to talk, to speak with freedom. But the acceptance of that voice and the acceptance of that message and the acceptance of what comes with that, there's absolutely no way we're anywhere near there. We are so far from that point right now in America. Even though I would like to believe that as a woman of color, I have a voice and I can speak, but no one will listen at times. And I feel that those two things are very far from each other, and I don't think there's any time soon that we'll get closer. If anything, we might go farther to get back closer.
Tatiana, you were telling me earlier about a trip that you made last year to the largest detention center for women and children in Texas. Could you tell us a little bit more about why you consider that to be, in your own words, a transformative moment?
I wake up with it every day, and I go to bed with it every day. It's besides my faith, seeing the faces of those mothers and those children at that detention center back in December during the Christmas holiday, where there are children that are asking just for a crayon to color on a white sheet of paper, and it was denied. children that were sick, deathly sick, that were giving Tylenol and Vicks Vapor Rub when they had a serious ear infection and throat infection. I think about those lives. I think about the women, the domestic violence victims that were walking in that caravan that came to our country for help, for protection, just like my family did, that were denied. So every day that I wake up, I think about those. I think about serving others. I think about the people, how my life could have been. And it wasn't, thankfully. But I think that I represent those people that have absolutely no voice. People that are voices that won't be able to speak. People that probably will not be legalized. People that will be sent back to their country to relive those stories over and over again. Children that won't have the opportunity to get an education in America like I did.
Let's return to the topic in the current campaign, where policies are on the line, right?
When it comes to policy, people are not fed with politics. People are fed with changes in that policy. What are the structural changes? What are the equitable structural changes? What are the racial equitable structural changes that we need to make in our policies in order for us to really impact the votes? Because you could be a great politician, but what about the public service part of it? And that to me is important. And serving in this city, and having served in the city now for 10 years, I wake up with that, the faces of the residents, especially now with COVID and the impacts that this had on my people, on brown and black people. I think about the essential workers that have to go to work, that don't have an option, like my parents that clean buildings, that work in the restaurants that are open, that worked at hotels that are now closed because there's no one coming. So I think about all those people and how that's impacting their families, and what are the policies that we can do as a country, as a city, and how we can work towards changing that to be able to help those folks.
You told me before this interview that you have a right to life position, that life begins at conception, and that informs by extension, your politics. Your faith informs your politics. But you also expanded that definition about what right to life covers. Can you elaborate?
Yes. So we can't say, and as an evangelical woman and a pro-life Democrat, that I am registered. You can't say, well, I'm pro-life as an evangelical and only look at the issue of abortion. It's impossible to do that. Because if we look at pro-life from a biblical context, there's many, many topics that are pro-life, such as access to education, hunger, affordable housing, immigration. So we can't just look as believers and say, well, pro-life is when the baby's in the womb. Well, what happens when that baby's out of the womb? What happens when that baby's in the detention center? What happens when that baby is in an inner city that might not have access to proper education or living in housing that's available for that child to be able to get the proper sleep and nutrition, to get educated and proper education? So yes, we can't focus on one pro-life issue and make decisions on candidates just because of that issue and forget the other ones that we have trailing behind that are just as important to life and to growth of a human being as that one opportunity to let the baby live. Well, the baby will live, but when the baby comes out of the womb, how is that baby's life continuing? And that's something we can't separate. We can't look away. We can't look away from one sin and then say that's a deadly sin, and then look away at the others that we're doing as a country, as a society, and say, well, those are social issues. Yes, they are, but you're intervening. You're affecting the life of a child, of a human, to be able to progress. And that to me is part of my faith. It's part of service. It's part of walking humbly, understanding justice, speaking truth. All these things are important to my faith, and I can't just water them down for one issue.
Tatiana, I understand that in this election 2020, it will be the first time that your parents have voted. I can only try to imagine, though I don't think I fully can, what that must be like in your home. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Every
time I'm in a voting booth, I think about how lucky and blessed I am to be able to do that. Because there was a point in my life where we were unknowns. There was no numbers attached to our name. Our name meant nothing but just people that worked. So every time that election season comes, specifically this one for me, and for my parents, because like you mentioned, this is the first time they're voting. My mother is so excited. We're doing early voting because I'll be in Philadelphia working on GOTV and just election issues for 3 days before the election. So we're going to go together, early vote, and my dad's going with my brother and the family in New Jersey. That's where they live. But we're very excited. We're counting down the days. COVID will not stop my 70-year-old mother, 65-year-old father. They are going to mask up and go because they understand like us, that it's our duty to vote. This is part of our responsibility. It's not an option. It's not if we feel like it. It's not if I have time. No. These decisions, when we go back to speaking about policy, our votes make possible those changes in policy that are necessary for the changes that the country needs. And if we think about it that way, the responsibility is on our hands to elect those people to make the changes. We might not agree 100% with the candidates. We might think, well, this person could have been better, or that person. At this point, it doesn't matter. What matters is, what is the country doing to be racially equitable? How can we get to that point, and who's the candidate that represents that? And my parents know that and understand that very well.
Tatiana, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Truly an unprecedented journey. Be safe.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.